most essential requirement for a nation to become a major military power is the need for autarky in critical weapon systems, in critical weapons technologies. I am afraid this has been a major failing as far as India is concerned. Till very recently, we were importing 70% and more of our high-tech weapons and equipment required for the armed forces. In recent years, we are told this has come down to 60 and 50%, but we are still far from self-sufficiency and complete autarky in critical weapon systems. Now, if you are not autarkic in such weapon systems, you are not self-reliant in such weapon systems, then you are very vulnerable to supply chain disruptions, especially of spare parts and the like in critical combat situations. The simple fact is that the weapons that we buy generally are 1 or 2 generations behind the cutting edge weapons in the advanced countries. As such, they have closed those factories, they have closed those shops, and we are suddenly left in a lurch when we have to go looking for spares, essential spares and parts to enhance the life of those systems. So, India, somewhere in the 60s, 70s, 80s, India came up with the very smart, so-called smart idea of trying to attain autarky by producing under license at home in the public sector. Now, this took the form of the assembly of semi-knockdown kits and completely knockdown kits. Like children, we were assembling mechano sets that we had received the components from outside, and complete kits were received and assembled at the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited or the heavy vehicles factory, etc., etc. We were assembling these semi-knockdown and completely knockdown kits. Now, this meant that we had no clue of how to design them. We had no knowledge of the know-why. We had the know-how perhaps, but we had no knowledge because of the design drawings, because of the specifications that we got. But we had no knowledge whatsoever of how to design these equipment. Now, a very simple example that I would give is in the 1971 war, the MiG-21 fighters were just carrying missiles for air-to-air combat. We wanted to add a 23 millimeter cannon so that this could be used for close-in combat, this could be used for ground attack, etc., etc. But we had no such system. So, we asked the HAL to add this 23 millimeter cannon. The HAL turned around and said they had no authority to, they had no knowledge of how to do it. Then the Air Force workshops were given this task, and they were able to mount the 23 millimeter cannon, which proved very, very effective in close air combat and in ground attack sorties and missions. This proved to be a major war winning factor, in fact, in that war. So, this highlighted to us that despite 30, 40 years of assembling kits, our scientists have learned nothing on how to design aircraft, how to design tanks, how to design these very major pieces of equipment. The only service that really did well in this department was the Indian Navy. From the very beginning, they insisted on establishing in IIT Delhi their own ship design bureau, and with the help of that, today the Indian Navy is building and not buying a new navy. Almost all the weapons platform, all the ship platforms that we are now building, including the aircraft carrier, including nuclear submarines, including conventional submarines, are more or less designed and built in India. What we still lack is the weapon sensors, the weapon suites, weapon platforms, and the engines. Whether it is ship engines, tank engines, aircraft engines, engine is a major lacuna with us, as it is also with China. We have acquired the expertise to build airframes and ships and tanks, but we lack the expertise to build their tank engines, ship engines, aircraft engines. These are largely still being imported. For example, for the light combat aircraft, we are importing the engines from the Americans, the G404 and the more advanced one for the second version of the light combat aircraft, the advanced version. Now the simple fact is that real impetus to doing our own design was when sanctions were imposed on us post the nuclear explosion of Pokhran in 1974. This forced us to not look for easier options, because the armed forces, in their hurry to get matching weapons for what Pakistan had, what China had, I mean, they would go in for imports. And they had no faith, very little faith, and justifiably so, in the capabilities then of the DRDO and the design agencies to carry out major design work, right. The HF-24 Maruth, we had hired Kurt Tank, the German designer, aircraft designer, to build an excellent airframe for us. The Egyptians were supposed to supply the aircraft engines, but they simply failed to deliver the engines in time. It was a highly underpowered engine, and therefore this aircraft, which was an excellent design and with a more powerful engine, even today it can be a very successful fighter. But we were very keen to discard. We wanted, it was so much easier to buy very cheap weapons from the Soviets rather than spend so much in our own design and this thing. So that hobbled our, that actually put back our indigenization program, this so-called indigenization by the way of assembling kits, semi-knocked down, completely knocked down kits, has been created an optical illusion of self-sufficiency and has really set back our indigenization efforts. Really been a major setback. It was an easier route out, easier option, cheaper option. The public sector, focusing all defense industries in the public sector, also created white elephants. They had no competition. Competition value engineers the product. We had no competition whatsoever. The public sector in enterprises, they had captive markets in the armed forces, and therefore there was very little incentive to do product improvement, to really do your own design, etc. So they were very happy assembling these kits. And like I told you, when we were asked to product improve, they could not even improve the products, you let alone building their own. So the first impetus came when the sanctions were imposed on us, which forced us to go alone. So in nuclear technology, we have become self-sufficient. In missile technology, thanks to Dr. Abdul Kalam, our missile man, we are today self-sufficient in missile technology, because we were forced. There was no option. The import option was just not there. So there was no, no option but to do it on our own way. You see, like I said, part of the blame must also be taken by the armed forces, in the sense that, we had designed in the artillery our own 74/24 howitzer for the mountains. Then we had designed our 105 IFG, Indian field gun, the very successful design. It's still operating in the army. A number of our regiments are still equipped with the 105. But yet we disbanded the design bureau, we allowed their team to disperse and retire and go home. And so when we needed 155mm caliber guns, we again had to import them from Sweden. The Bofors was a master gun, but because it was mired in kickbacks and controversy, 450 guns were purchased outright. 1,000 of them were to be manufactured in India, and a big setback was given to this program. Now, one of the weaknesses of our design is the metallurgy. We got the tank designs from Russia, T-54, T-55, then the T-72, T-90 tanks. But the metallurgy, especially of the gun barrels, was very poor, and we had a number of instances of these gun barrels, flowering. This is where the private sector in India can do such a great deal to enhance our capabilities. But because of the public sector trying to keep out the private sector entirely from the defense manufacture, and that the Gandhian socialism, Nehruvian socialism, the commanding heights of the economy must be held by the private sector. Now all that crap took with the fall of the Soviet Union. The public sectors have collapsed all over the world. So it is now the private sector which is really efficient, lean, mean, efficient, competitive. Now thank God the private sector in India is coming of age, despite the opposition from some sections in the DRDO, in the public sector defense enterprises, in the Ministry of Defense, in the armed forces also. Because import is a very lucrative kind of a thing and nobody wants to give up the option of import. At the very least it helps you to go abroad. I mean, so this is this nonsense has to be stopped, and it is now energetically a stop has been put. We have listed out the Defence Ministry that these items will not be imported. 155mm guns will not be imported, because we found that the foreign competitors, original equipment manufacturers were were underbidding. They were making sure that the Indian sectors don't come up and offer competition to them tomorrow. Let me give you the example of the 155mm guns. The Ordnance Factory Board, along with the Artillery Directorate of the Indian Army, they came up with an improved version of the Bofors, and they called it the Dhanush. Now this is a pretty good gun, very good design, but the problem is with the metallurgy. A number of the barrels in the initial trials, they flowered, they burst open. Maybe the defect was due to the ammunition or what. I am very sure it has been pinpointed, and now they are trying to product improve. The other was the Kalyani Forge, the Larsen and Toubro, the Tatas. Now these companies have terrific expertise in forging. Bharat Forge. I mean, they have been building railway axles and exporting to the United States. Now they had the in-house capability. Kalyani Forge, he went to Sweden and he brought a whole 155mm plant which they were selling as scrap. He bought it and transferred the plant to India, and now he has helped, along with the DRDO, they have made the ATAGs, Advanced Stored Artillery Gun Systems. Now this is what ails our self indigenization, self-help enterprises in India. The gun that the DRDO, the Kalyani Forge, etc. came out with, the Tatas came out with, was a world beater design, where the American 155mm gun has a range of 45 kilometers. This ATAGs had a range of 48 kilometers. They had a quick fire capability of 3 rounds a minute. This had the quick fire capability of 5 rounds a minute. They had a diesel, prime, a mover to auxiliary propulsion unit. This one has an electrical auxiliary propulsion unit, which is very low sound signature, and it helps the gun to change location once it has fired a salvo, because these guns, heavier guns, can be picked up and subjected to counter battery fire. This was one of the world's best design. But I am very sorry to state, our artillery directorate fought it tooth, nail and claw. This has got a weight of 18 tons. They have specified a weight of 12 to 13 tons, and therefore we just simply can't accept. What nonsense! If to the north Karen Plateau at 5,000 meters in Sikkim, in Ladakh, the T-72 tanks, T-92 tanks weighing 45 tons and more can go. If the bridges can take those, what is the problem with accepting guns that weigh 18 kilometers? If they give you the advantage of longer range, greater accuracy, greater rate of fire, and indigenous guns at that. Even till now, some spanners are being thrown in the wheel. People are trying to resist. They were very keen to get the Israeli gun, which actually the Israelis had offered at, I am told, a cheaper price. But then how will you get your own indigenous system going? So I am glad that Defence Ministry has now ruled that no bloody further imports in these major guns. And as the present Army Chief very rightly says, our GSQRs can't be catch-all. For the deserts, mountains, plains, everywhere we'll have the same design specifications, and in trying to meet all design parameters, you end up with something that is not optimal. So you need a separate gun for the deserts, please do so. You need a separate gun for the mountains, go ahead and do it and design it specifically. You have the in-house design capabilities now. So like I said, at long last this is taking place. The service that has done the best is the Navy, and now even the Air Force has come up with the light combat aircraft. We had I have told you the story of the artillery guns, medium guns. We need 1,800 of these guns urgently. They are a war winning factor. The 65 war, the medium guns were a war winning factor. 71 war, they were a war winning factor. Kargil, they were most certainly a war winning factor. So let's speed up the induction of the medium guns. Let's give a chance to our private sector. Not only can we build, we can export. The light combat aircraft is a success story. It is a success story. It took so many years to build, but every country has to learn by by making mistakes. The Americans have learned that way, the Russians have learned that way. So many designs have failed, but that is a part of the learning process. So at last we have now got the design team active and kicking for the light combat aircraft. They are producing a very versatile fighter which is better than the Chinese Pakistani JF-17. In fact, any expo, Air Force expo, where this aircraft go, the Chinese withdraw their JF-17 because this is superior. So there is a success story. The guided missile programs is a success story. The 155 millimeter guns is a success story. Arjun is a limited success story, but once again, there is the to and fro between the armed forces and the DRDO, and the armed forces were, set themselves up as critiques. You please help the design team. You involve your officers like the Navy involves its officers. It should be your task in life to see that design works and not just act as critics. We don't accept this, we don't accept, it has this, it has that. I mean, you please make it work. It's in your interest to get it made within the country. It will be cheaper, you can export it, you can get the economy of scales. And I'm very now certain that at long last these points after 75 years of independence have now sunk home, and the present government is giving a major emphasis on Atmanirbhar. While the Prime Minister was in the United States of America, India sent out clear signals of its autarky in major weapon systems. India sent out a clear signal that it was a major power on its own, and it did not need to hang on to the coattails of any other country. With what has happened in Afghanistan, with the way Turkey is trying to muscle into South Asia, trying to establish a bloody caliphate, the threats to the Indian Republic have never been higher at any point in time. This is not the time to pinch pennies and go in for cost savings. This is the time to expand and modernize the armed forces at a breakneck pace. If you don't, we are doomed. Let's get that lesson straight. Your threats have expanded. That means you need a larger armed forces to deal with it. You need to enhance your squadron strength of your Air Force, which has been dwindling. How did we allow it to dwindle? Somebody needs to be, taken to task for this. People must be held accountable. All those finance ministry wallas who refuse to pay for the modernization and expansion of our armed forces. When Jetli ji came, when this government came, we thought we would have a big jump in our defense budgets. He insisted, because of the bureaucrats, that the defense budget would just be changed to cater for inflation. That's all. And therefore, a lot of time has been lost. Fortunately, with the coming of the CDS, now we are speeding up things. Last year, when the Chinese threat suddenly came up, 30 bloody aircraft jet fighters were brought overnight. We are trying to speed up entry of S-400 anti-aircraft missile system, anti-missile system from the Russians. But we have to now get on and do it on our own. And we are succeeding to quite some extent. And while Prime Minister Modi was in the United States, meeting President Joe Biden, meeting the Japanese Prime Minister, the Australian Prime Minister addressing the UN General Assembly, India sent out clear messaging and signals. We tested our Agni 5. The Agni 5 is an intercontinental ballistic missile with 5 to 8,000 kilometer range. It is highly accurate, 10 meters to 80 meters circular error of probability. That means within Rawalpindi, it can home on to the general headquarters war room of the Pakistan Army and blow it to smithereens. This missile can hit Beijing and any other city in China. In terms of just range, it can hit Turkey and Ankara. It can go beyond towards Europe. That is the range it has got. We will use it only against, we have a no first use policy. We will only use it against those who threaten India directly. Those who dare to threaten to use or use nuclear weapons against us, it will only be employed against them in self-defense. But this capability, people, India's enemies, adversaries can now ignore only at their own extreme peril. Covers the whole of Pakistan. In fact, Pakistan was already being covered by our Agni 1s and 2s and 3s. Agni 5 is primarily a deterrent against China. And then we have agreed to induct into the army 118 improved Arjun Mark 1As. These have got 72 improvements over the previous Arjuns, as you know, when we tested them out, thoroughly tried them out, introduced them into our army, into the desert sector. This is an excellent tank. It is a copy, basically the design is very similar to the design of the German Leopard tank, which is one of the world leading tanks even till today. 120 millimeter gun, a gun that can fire tank rounds as well as missiles. Very powerful engine, and in terms of driving and maintenance, in terms of cross-country capability, it is an excellent tank. It has beaten the lighter Russian tanks in trials. It has got a gun stabilized system. It can fire on the move. It can fight by day. It can fight by night. It has those image intensifier sights which can turn night into day. It's got 24 hours all weather capability. It's an excellent tank, and frankly we should have made many more of these. But because we wanted to go in for tried and tested tanks from the Russians, so which is okay, which is good, T-72, T-90, but now the design expertise that we have gained in making the Arjun must be brought into play when we make a design for our next generation main battle tank, instead of again importing, because that is the easier option, sometimes even cheaper option. But we have to break this gridlock. We have to break this logjam. We also tested our Akash Prime anti-aircraft missile, surface to air missile SAM. It is a quick reaction SAM, mid-range missile. It is effective against approaching enemy fighters, bombers, cruise missiles, enemy UAVs, and even the higher grade missiles. It is an excellent weapon system, and it is entirely wholly indigenous. It was designed to replace the SAM-6 Quadrat Russian weapon systems of the 73 era that we had acquired from the Soviet Union. You know, your threat was initially China, Pakistan only. Now it has expanded China, Pakistan, Taliban, Turkey. And you say that we will reduce our armed forces? Are you living in Alice in Wonderland? You have to expand capabilities. You have to increase and put in place out of area intervention capabilities. If we have to intervene sometimes in Kabul, it doesn't pay to say, oh, we have no direct land borders with Afghanistan, we just can't intervene there. How did we send 20,000 troops under the UN mandate to Sierra Leone? Why have we spent 10,000 troops to Sudan? Do we have any direct land borders? This is utter nonsense that we can't go anywhere but fight inside India and only in Panipat. This Panipat syndrome has been a historical disaster. Let us please not get back to that. If you are required to intervene there, create the capabilities. Out of area intervention capabilities, you need a marine division, you need an air assault division in addition to whatever you have. You forget about cutting and downsizing. That is madness. If the threats go up, then we have to spend more. If we will die but we will not spend on defense, then you will die as a nation state. I think the time has come to take a reality check. If you need to spend more on your defense, you need to spend more. Nothing else matters, because if the nation ceases to exist, what will you recapitalize the banks for? Nobody bats an eyelid in spending 1.5 lakh crores to recapitalize some bust banks. But if you have to spend 5,000 crores for a defense deal, 30 questions are asked. Why? Okay, then you save and raise, you cut down your manpower. Sir, we need more troops to fight. Ultimately, somebody has to fight. And we now can't, get the Indian army to the conscription era. It has been an all volunteer army. It has been an army that has fought and won every war that it has fought, because it is all volunteer. The Americans went from a conscript army to a all volunteer army. The Chinese army is a conscript army of 4 years it comes for. And you can see the severe drop in fighting capabilities. Now we have an all volunteer army. Now some people want to make it a conscript army. 2-2 साल के लिए लोग लाएंगे, फिर वो चले जाएंगे, सस्ता हो जाएगा, घटिया हो जाएगा, घटिया होगा और आप मार खाएंगे. You see, I'm sorry, defense does not come cheap, because all the other countries are spending their bottom dollars to get a lead over you. And in trying to pinch pennies, if you harm your armed forces, then you are destroying the nation state. You are sowing the seeds of its destruction. Let me again repeat and re-emphasize. Today, you need to enhance, expand and modernize your armed forces at a breakneck speed. You need to do it with your own indigenous capabilities, your own design capabilities. Please involve your private sector in a major way. It will give you the efficiencies of competition, value engineering by competition. The public sector has failed us badly. So we need to now get into the private sector, and I am very happy to note that the government is doing just that. The Tatas are going to make your Avro replacement aircraft, the Airbus design. It is going to, for the first time, aircraft design has been given to a private firm. So, like I said, the Kalyani Forge is a success story. Let niggardliness not come in the way and obstructionism not come in the way of trying to sabotage every in-house defense project. We need to become self-sufficient, self-reliant, indigenous, indigenization or bust should be the mantra, and that is exactly what the Prime Minister has said with Atmanirbhar. We are getting there, and the message has been sent loud and clear to the whole world. We don't need to hang on to the coattails of the United States or Russia or any other power. We are a major power in ourselves. Shortly we will be exporting weapons, tanks, helicopters, artillery, 155mm guns. I mean, there is so much that we can export: light combat aircraft, jet fighters, etc., missiles. BrahMos cruise missiles are already in great demand. Vietnam wants them, other countries wants them in Southeast Asia, Greece wants them. Let's start becoming, instead of importing, exporting weapons. That will give us economies of scale. It will give a great fillip to our defense industries. It will create jobs in India. Let's not outsource our jobs to foreign countries. We have a major employment crisis. So we must produce at home, we must indigenize, we must get our design and know-how and know-why capabilities, and we will have to do it fast. We don't have all the time in the world. Like I said, your threats are rising by the day. China and Pakistan, an alliance, hostile alliance. Already Pakistan is waging asymmetric war against you. Now China and Turkey are stepping in to encourage Pakistan to wage asymmetric war against India on a major scale. Taliban will be a great force multiplier for the Pakistan army in combat and in asymmetric war. So, we just sit back and do nothing. We will have to expand, we will have to modernize our armed forces, we will have to create enhanced capabilities for out of area intervention in terms of an air assault division, a marine division. You may need a marine division for the Maldives, for wherever in the ocean flank, and you might as well put it in place before the problems come. China is bustling into the Indian Ocean region in a very big way. This is not the time to say we are going to economize only on defense. But we will spend lakhs of crores to recapitalize bust banks, but we will not spend a penny. We will cut pennies from the defense. That is a disastrous outlook. Disastrous outlook. If you need more, you better get that more if you want to survive as a nation state. Who lives if India dies? Jai Bharat, Jai Hind.